Welcome everyone to another episode of the Jonathan Project Podcast. Our purpose is to help men navigate the complexities of the world around them and to become the men that God wants them to be. Iron sharpening iron here each and every week. And we take the biblical example of Jonathan and his loyalty and friendship with his king, David, as the inspiration for this podcast. If you would like Jason and me to come on out to one of your men's events, your church, business functions, please hit us up at theJonathanProjectPodcast at gmail.com. Again, theJonathanProjectPodcast at gmail.com. Jason, welcome to yet another episode of the Jonathan Project. How you doing, man?
Oh, man. Well, good morning. Good morning. Everything's good here. You know, it's Saturday morning for everybody here. Everybody's listening. Everybody knows, right? We record on Saturday morning or Sunday afternoons. It's good. I had to get up. I think I've got another star land nav candidate out there. He's, with the chickens.
Oh, crazy chickens.
Yeah, I think he's about to be peer evaled out. We still do peer evals. That was part of my selection.
You didn't get voted off the island.
Yeah, he's about to get voted off. Yeah. So there we are. I'm also glad to see you're wearing one of your college sweatshirts.
That's right. Yeah. Shout out to the cadets at Norwich University, where the first time I went through graduate school, that's where I was at. So
you have more degrees than a thermometer.
That's right. And I don't know how to put any of them to use.
I think it's
I mean, it's funny. So, last week, everyone was listening, man, you were going through it with maintenance. And I think we tagged and did a high five because I have a huge section of drywall, which is why I had to kind of relocate for today's show. But that's missing because I found out we have some water and mold issues going on. So, it's always something, man, but we're going to get to it.
Yeah, I'm kind of paranoid right now for any running water sounds in the house. I'm not gonna
You got a little trauma there?
Yeah. So, no, good. So let's get started. What do you lead into it there? I'll let you tee it off.
Yeah. So we, as always, we talk every day, a little iron sharpening iron, and we came up for the audience for this episode. We were both driving to work, and it's the holidays, which everyone knows. And we really started thinking about this verse from Luke 4:24 as we were having various discussions that, no prophet has honor in his own country. That's a paraphrase, right? But it also kind of translates to husbands, right? And this is not going to be an episode where we're beating up on our significant others or the greater half of our society there and women. But it is a call for men. And we're going to really dial into from the Genesis 3:1-6 story of Adam and Eve and kind of what Satan's plan is in design against marriages, right? And what do we mean by that? No prophet has honor, no husband has honor at home. It is very quick and easy, especially in this stressful time where all the past traumas of the holidays and stress and expectations and just being reflective as we are at this end of the year kind of moments, for us to stop seeing each other, stop hearing each other, and for men to fall into the silent category of not wanting to lead and guide and shepherd their family. So it's kind of what we're going to tee up and talk about. Really important topic. You don't want to get into shutdown mode as a guy because the adversary, that's what he wants. And we're going to talk about that, Jason. So we're off.
No, that's a good point. Guys, it is the holiday season. And like you and I were talking about earlier, the holiday season is like a mini deployment. It's where all your foundational marriage training, if you would, is coming together. And you're either going to have a good time or holidays are going to be extremely stressful. It's funny. We sing joy to the world. We sing joy, 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 but it's actually one of the more depressing times of the year.
Yeah.
People. And we, gave a lot of thought to what you had to say about guys, especially, I thought about JB with the Man Up program and how an absentee of fathers is just kind of plaguing the nation.
Yeah.
I gave a lot of thought to that, but I also looked at when guys are quiet. I looked at what is society telling us that men should be. There's always this perception of what a man should be, and I think you got to look at what it should be in the Bible. That's the standard for truth. I think, when you look at it, one of the greatest influences. You remember that show that had Michael J. Fox on as it was like a Family Ties. Remember that? Back in
Yeah.
yeah. Well, they asked the character that Michael J. Fox plays is tell us an influential book, and I'm going to date myself by this. Tell us one of the most influential books, and he goes TV Guide. But he was right. When you think about it, it is.
Yeah.
TV has a tremendous influence.
Yeah.
But when you look at how dads are portrayed in TV, it's always dumbing down. And so you have social media devaluing you, right? Or
Yes.
TV devaluing you. Even like pick a TV show, maybe it's a good guy that does a lot of good, but he's always making internal mistakes that's got to be saved by his wife. Things like that. And you've got TV dads like Homer Simpson that it has no redeemable qualities, period. But, the just pick one. And it's always the same decline of intellectual value. And it made me think about that. A prophet has no honor in his own home.
Yeah.
Type deal. And how we don't do that. I'll tell you funny before I just seem like I'm off on a tangent. When my daughter was a senior in high school, she come by and she's like doing some psychology homework, right?
Yeah.
My wife and I were sitting on the couch. I was kind of finishing up my doctorate, and she literally comes in and goes, "I have some psychology homework. I need some help." And I'm like, "Yes, this is it." Literally turned straight to my wife and goes, "Would you read this paper and make sure it makes sense?" It happens.
But it does happen, Jason, and it kind of gets to the heart of what we're talking about here is that familiarity in our relationships and the central relationship, it can breed a little bit of contempt. Not necessarily maliciously, but our history and our experiences, like with our families, can lead to the point where men become a character, right? Like this caricature of what God really wanted for them, right? And for us to be in the home where it's like the wife is taking on a lot of those responsibilities, and a lot of the women do. They're cooking, they're cleaning, they're trying to get the kids through their homework and to events and this and that. And society tells and reinforces and double downs that men don't carry any of the load at home, right? And I know that's not the case with our homes in particular, and a lot of other guys, right? Where men are stepping up and you're just leading and you're helping. And leading is like, hey, I see there's dirty dishes, I just do them. I see this, I just do it, right? That's leading. It's not a role thing that I have to wait for my wife to get up and do something. But society paints it that way.
Yeah.
And a lot of women take in through social media, in particular, they absorb these notions. And Satan plants this seed, like, well, your husband is just this guy that, he only wants his basic needs met, and he's not really helping. And so, therefore, when it comes time and you see the lion at the gates, and you're like, wait a minute, we shouldn't be going off of the latest trend of TikTok, or we shouldn't be listening to what Becky down the street has to say. It's hard to hear that, right? That prophet, right? That husband, it's hard to receive that message because there's a little bit of contempt. Like, well, how dare you try to tell me what it is? Well, wait a minute. Let's step back and put this into, especially for men that are trying to be godly and women that are trying to follow after God. What is the right thing to do? There is an order. And we're going to hit this a little bit later and talk about where this all kind of fell off the tracks. And the same scheme that was put into place with Adam and Eve is still being applied today. The tools are just a little bit more sophisticated. But yeah, I think you have a good point. Like we have to slow down and realize that, the authority that you carry, it's not easily recognized. And we all have that happen as men. It's like, hey, well, dad's here. I see it all the time with my kids. Hey, where's mom at? And I'm like, well, what do you need? Yeah. I just need to find mom. I'm looking for something to eat. It's like,
I'll help you out. Yeah.
I'll help you with that.
No, when you look at the relationship between husband and wife, it's so unique. And it's really the second relationship in the Bible. The first one
Yeah.
was between God and Adam, right? And then there's
Hmm.
the second. God makes things in order. It's always very interesting to me if you follow Genesis, you see that they're building blocks as he
Hmm.
kind of moves forward. But if that relationship, not only is it unique, but it's it's like an expressway to get to the heart of the matter,
Yes,
and
sir.
it can lead to destruction. Look at Job's life. We've talked about Job. What an
Yeah.
incredible story.
Hmm.
Interesting fact, Job doesn't come on the scene till later in the first chapter or second chapter, I can't remember. But of everyone that Satan took out of Job's life, he left the wife. He left Job's wife.
Yeah.
Because she had a voice that spoke to his heart. And so words can be very powerful, good and bad, and so that relationship's pretty unique. But go ahead.
No. And I think, I mean, that's a good segue to, the segment talking about submission, Adam and Eve, because when we hear in our society against submission, it has become, and very purposefully, to be quite honest, in the era of where you're supposed to be a beta male, and I'm not trying to, be pejorative. I'm not trying to be mean spirited, but society tells us, right, that if I am trying to shepherd my home in a godly way, if I'm trying to
Mhm.
protect my wife from certain influences, my daughter or whoever, I'm a toxic male. I'm out of touch. I'm outdated,
Yeah,
and I'm trying to control and manipulate, right? And especially, the adversary in the world likes to attack this whole concept of submission. But I like to say up front, submission is not tied to any gender.
yeah,
That's not biblical. Submission, you go to, and I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself in my notes, but we'll circle back. In James, I think it's 3:18. Don't quote me on that. I'll find it in the notes here later. But basically, it talks about submission is the key to being a peacemaker. And if you want peace in your home and peace in your relationships, you have to be willing to submit. But we'll get into that. But
yeah,
Adam and Eve, Jason,
yeah.
um,
In the garden.
the story of the fall, where all the first contentions and
Yeah.
I can only imagine the discussions we didn't get in the Bible
Oh,
of
yeah.
how that went down, right?
Yeah. By the way, what I really do, I read part of this during some of my graduate studies,
Yeah.
and it dawned on me one day. I don't know what the timeline is between chapter 2 and 3, right? Like
Yeah.
creation of woman, there's a marriage, and he gives advice, and then chapter 3 starts the temptation, and then the fall, right?
Mm-hmm.
So things probably went along very well for quite a long period of time, right? So we'd like to think, but those are the big events. So
Yeah.
uh, go ahead.
No, so I mean the Genesis 3:1-6, the story of Eve being tempted, the ultimate fall where between her and Adam. This is a small rock debate, and this is what I mean by that. Me and Jason have kind of highlighted what she be carrying in her rucksack. This is a small thing. It doesn't illustrate the decision for accepting Jesus Christ. Rather, it's one of these things like if you imagine rocks in a jar, it's going to fill in those voids in our life. It helps us walk and understand our relationship with Him. So in Genesis 3:6, we see Eve took the fruit from the tree and she said it was good to eat. Now, again, there's a question in there. How did she know it was good? Because the Lord had told them, you can't touch it, you can't eat it. So did
Mhm.
Satan take a bite? Did the serpent take a bite? We don't know. But again, I want you to start kind of thinking and reflecting through this whole scene. And it was pleasing to the eye. It was desirable for gaining wisdom. She ate it and she gave some to her husband. So right here, first point, there's a wide debate on this. In my little research, was Adam there the whole time? Was he close by? Was he within earshot? What we do know for absolute fact, she turned, he was there, he saw her
Mhm.
grabbing the fruit, which he knew, she knew, you're not supposed to touch it. And here's the thing, he didn't do anything. And that's the
Yeah.
whole point that Satan wanted, right? He let it happen.
Yeah. Well, there was that little bit of where God said, "Don't eat of it," right? And Eve goes, well, if I touch it, I'll die. He goes, not really. If you touch it, you won't die, which was, that a little bit of not so true, right? That you got to be careful of. But you're right. Why was Adam silent? Hey, if he was, that's it. Like, what is it? George Orwell says the only thing that is needed for evil to succeed is good men to do nothing.
That's absolutely true.
And as you look at this holiday season and people come up and you're in the name of joy and spirit, you're gonna have people that are no longer moving in the same direction, right? And if you're not moving in the same direction, it means by nature of that statement, one of you will feel isolated. And you don't want that, because that's the fissure that Satan will capitalize on to create that divide in your marriage. Think about, the Bible talks so much. By the way, I'm in the book of Hosea. Talk about a marriage problem, right?
Oh, yeah.
He married Gomer, the prostitute.
The prostitute, yeah.
Yeah.
Ouch.
Yeah.
Ouchie, ouch.
Yeah. So, but it's a great book because it does talk about how much God loves us. But that's it. How do you insulate against that divide as a family, Because I do. You see guys out shopping, they've completely checked out. That's an activity that's going to occur.
Yes.
Holiday gift buying is here. The guys have completely checked out. If you, all right, maybe she's not eating the fruit of the tree, but you're probably getting that credit card swipe, or whatever you do now. Maybe your phone, touching it. It's so many ways to pay for things. It's ridiculous.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right, Jason. Like, there are so many little things, little chinks in your armor that can get knocked at throughout the year. But when we look at that, the ultimate goal to create division and separate unity, marriage is a purest reflection of God's love and design for humanity that we have, and it's a reason why that was the first institution that Satan went after. You don't see him attacking Adam when it was just Adam. We don't get a record of that. But as soon as God introduced another, because Satan knows the Bible in and out, he's like, where two or more are gathered, the Lord is there, right? He's like, I can't have this, right? Yeah. And he went after her when she was isolated. And he went after her in a way that was pleasing. So, when we find these conversations that we have with our spouses, that's one of the points. It's not necessarily that something wrong is going on. When we talk about, like, whatever it may be in your home, spending, right? Like, or getting together for the holiday, extra parties, all these expectations. But sometimes those things can lead to death, right? Yeah. Eve didn't maliciously turn to Adam, and I believe this. It wasn't a malicious act, but it doesn't negate the fact that it brought on eternal ramifications. Yeah. Right? And Satan is sitting back and watching. And Adam, I'm not saying that he was beat down at that point, but let's take it to a modern kind of way. Guys can get to the point where, like, you know what? I don't want to argue. Yeah, I don't want to fight. I'm just going to keep my lips together. And that's absolutely wrong. That negates what God has called you to do as a husband and as a man. Sure. And we can see the enemy at the gate, right? Yeah. And in the same token, you do have guys that go, well, I'm just in charge. You got to do this. But then you also have to remember that's the daughter of a king, right? Yes. And so your marriage, it's a blessing and a gift for each other. And there's absolutely ways to be a leader without being that authoritarian dictator, right? Yeah. And that's got to be very clear, because if we're to reflect Christ, Christ was not that dictator, No. But I agree with you. If you sit there and you're in silence because I'm beat down, or if you're beating the other spouse down emotionally, mentally, whatever, where they just don't talk, you're creating the divide. That's a good point, because you're right. Where two or more gathered in his name, there he is. Yes, sir. A lot goes on in the holidays. You're in the fray of it. You better be together. Yeah. And not just during this season, but every season, and that's why I say that the tools that we see reflected in Genesis 3:1-6, that that manipulation, that slight twisting of
Mm-hmm.
things, right? And I'm so interested when we get to the other side of eternity. Like, there's so many of these details in these little stories that I am absolutely fascinated. I got a lot of questions, right? I'm sure I'm going to be told to put my hand down during the Q&A session during onboarding. But
Onboarding, I got a lot of questions.
I got a lot of questions.
Yeah, which I
But
may not get answered. Job had a
no,
lot of
absolutely,
questions. He didn't get answered. Yeah,
absolutely, man.
but you're right. When you take a look at it, and I really tried to dig into the psychology. Why is it that we sometimes avoid what is true in hopes there's some kind of secret out there,
Yep.
right?
Mm.
As a family, what counts the most in the holidays, most at any time, is unification, right?
Mm-hmm.
There is no little wrapping under the tree that is more valuable than unification of the family, because in reality, that's it. We've layered on a lot of materialistic things, but in reality, it's being together. It's that joy,
Yeah.
and don't let one of your gifts be division during this time. When
That's a good one.
when you're a family and you're together, the prophet doesn't have any honor in his own home. Jesus spoke that when he went to Nazareth.
Yeah.
There he was, and they're like, aren't you the carpenter's son?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was, come on.
Yeah. People have a hard time with, like I said, the proximity to someone. And it's a dangerous slippery slope. We talked about this before, that just because a messenger brings you something doesn't mean it's not true. I think about Nathan and David.
Mm-hmm.
I think about like what that takes to be a prophet, and you're going to the king and saying, you know what, you're a little bit off track. Or for a husband, and we're like, hey, like, we don't need to put ourselves into eternal debt for one day to celebrate the king. Or I don't think that friendship that you have is the best, or whatever the conversation may be that is a little tenuous, that you're tiptoeing around as a guy. You need to call that out, because it could be the enemy at your gate.
You're right. Right. Satan's always trying to look at ways to push things in. I heard a pastor say the other day, you literally could miss heaven by 18 inches, which is about the width of somebody's head. Like, you can you know what I mean? Like, you can think you know the best answer, but that's not the case.
Yeah.
You have to, both parties have to ground themselves in biblical truth.
Yes.
And move for that. But you hit something earlier about submission.
Yeah.
Right? Hey, what does the Bible say? Well, let me tell you, the Bible says a lot.
A lot.
And it may not be what you want to digest.
There you go.
Right? Like, it's what it is. I have to submit to.
Yep. That's a great point, Jason. And, submission is the key to a peaceful home, but it's not what a lot of guys think. I think a lot of guys they heard that in the sermon and like, boop, and then you just turn the ears off like, oh, she has to submit. Like, no, submission in marriage is not a her thing. It's a God thing. Yeah. And submission isn't just for the wives, it's for peacemakers. Getting to that verse I was talking about earlier, it was James 3:17-18, where he kind of lays out that submission is kind of this gateway for living one righteousness, which is then following God's design in whatever aspect of life it is what righteousness is. But in this case, we're talking about here today in marriage. And without being submitted, without first being both of you submitted to God, that's the first thing you're supposed to be submitted to. And then number two, submitted to each other, where you're not demanding submission as a husband, right? And then you're not refusing to submit to God. You're over here wanting everyone in the house to follow you, and you don't want to go to church on Sundays. You don't want to do a Bible study.
Yeah,
it doesn't work like that, right? But
no,
same thing for wives, right? Like, they're not to reject submission. Again, we talked about how just because your husband is the messenger, and if he's submitted to God, let's put that into right order. I'm not saying that he's out here being abusive or drinking or doing the wrong things, but if he's submitted to God, then you got to follow that truth, right? And and I know that's a slippery slope, and I don't want to get myself into trouble, but it's the truth, right? We have to be in order, and that's
Yeah.
the key thing here. There is an order in God's kingdom, and it's not an order of chaos, right?
No, it is. I think sometimes we forget things and we're always looking for something. I heard
Hmm.
we're not static creatures. We're running from something or to something to avoid
Hmm.
something.
Sure.
And I think, when you talk about this, a prophet has no honor in his own home. What went through my mind is I had a battalion commander one time that made the statement that, you know, uh, our families see us very differently than who our peers see us as, right? And
Hmm.
he said, probably one of the smartest things. He goes, believe it or not, Clark Kent was a great disguise for Superman. And he said, because people saw everyday Clark Kent
Yeah.
fumbling around, not very good, and they assumed that was all there was to it, right?
Hmm.
And it made me stop and think about how TV portrays dads, and they go forward, but they also portray. I've noticed here recently, just even the mom being uh, fumbling around, right? And his
Sure.
kids look at it and they go, because I don't know if you haven't experienced this yet or not. We've talked a little bit, but somewhere around the early teens, kids become incredibly brilliant, and they know everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, you're just like, that's not going to work out. I've seen that a bunch. It's not going to
Yeah.
work out, but
Seen that movie before.
yeah, I've seen that play out. Uh, yeah. So, but go ahead.
No, I know. I think that ultimately when we talk about submission and how to find peace in our family life, it is that you have to be careful of the world's definitions of things, because
Hmm.
there's a strong movement in the world to really break up what is viewed as, I hear the word traditional, but just viewed as what the Bible's design for family life looks like.
Hmm.
And a lot of that sits on husbands and wives having these own little spheres of influence. Well, you should do this and I should do that, versus that unity that we talked about, up front, that God really designed. When
Yeah.
we look at the word in the Bible for the helper, like you look at what the actual the original text is, it's a strong, powerful word. It means to, like, it's a builder. That is what, a good godly woman does for a man, and a good godly man, he shepherds and he protects and he brings out the best, and he
Hmm.
allows her to be what women are. They're multipliers. You watch, as a man and woman come together, a woman can take and make and build a child. She can build a home. She can help a
Oh,
man
yeah.
become something that he cannot. Just on the opposite side, we see in the Bible, we get examples of like Delilahs and Jezebels. They can absolutely destroy.
Hmm. Gomer.
And so there's such a power, and Satan understands that. And that's why he goes after our young ladies, our young girls at an early age, and wants to put it into their head that it needs to be all about you, right?
Yeah.
And if he loves you, he's gonna just let you do what you want to do. And that's absolutely the farthest thing from loving our spouses, our daughters, our sisters, whoever we have a chance as men to influence. It's not just about letting someone do what they want to do. And you're not
Yeah.
trying to control them, but you're trying to keep them, again, from the jaws of this lion that's roaring around trying to find them.
You said something pretty unique when you said that society right now, it super elevates things. And as women, it super elevates them. We talk about roles and this, that, and the other. No matter what one of the roles is, we can debate those all day, but absolutely, it's not to supersede our Lord and Savior's position in our lives, right?
Hmm.
Like when you talk about submitting to submission, I have to submit to Christ. I cannot put my wife on a pedestal above that. It was
Hmm.
very interesting. We attended church years ago. It's kind of a rural church, but on the cusp of a growing town. And when it was a deacon candidate, when he got up to speak, he goes, he had 30 minutes to speak, kind of hey, I'm a candidate. This is where I see. He literally spent 20 minutes talking about how great his wife was. And then 10 minutes, he talked about something or 5 minutes in the Bible and then 5 minute closeout. And I remember I looked over at my wife and I said, I'm not sure what you got out of that sermon, but what I got out of it is a whole lot of knowledge about his wife. It's,
Yeah.
our priorities have to be there. If we're going to be a leader or in any home, if you're a single mom out there, your priority is not to chase the man, but to, it's not finding another man, but to submit to Jesus Christ. If you're a husband or a dad out there, it's not to find another woman. It's Christ first, and then those things come into play. Another thing, and Colby, I don't want to derail it. I know we got time, but Proverbs 31. It's a chapter devoted specifically to women.
Mm-hmm.
What a great chapter, because you hit it. They're a multiplier, and that's not just a genetic multiplier, like, oh, you're just here to have kids. You multiply emotions throughout the house.
Yeah.
Why do you think there's some truth to that happy wife, happy life statement?
A
You
little
know what I
bit.
mean?
A little bit.
A little bit of truth to that.
Yeah.
Because of that. But great chapter. Go ahead.
No, I think just to tie into that, as we put a bow on this episode, I look at Proverbs 14:1, which is a powerful message an empowering message to women of what they actually are to the home. Because again, I hate this notion of society that paints godly women as they're weak by following into godly submission, because that's not the case. You are a helper. You multiply what I can do and you make me better. So Proverbs 14:1, excuse me. The wise of women builds her house, but the folly with her own hands tears it down.
Yeah.
And that's what it is. A woman can bring such a peace and a joy and a happiness. And I got it. There are a lot of guys out there that are not following after, as Jason said, the number one thing, which is pursuing God. I understand that. And there's a lot of load on women, and it shouldn't be. And we've talked about this in other episodes, that men need to be what God designs them to be.
Mm-hmm.
But what I would encourage is that grace that God gives you, and you loving that spouse can make things different, and it's such a blessing to have a godly helper with you. So, as we go through the holiday season, it's a tough time. It can be a rough time, but it really should give us a chance to reflect on, hey, are we in unity? Are we fighting the same fight? Do we have the same common operating picture here for our family, a vision for our family, and moving forward in the new year? It's never too late to make a change. So
that's a good point.
Yeah.
I think one of the telltale signs as we move forward, if your spouse is checked out, if you're only doing what you want to do, man, you're not in unity. You're not. You obviously, it's coming apart.
Yes, sir.
Because so you gotta. It's one of those things you got to keep your hands on it. You really do. You got to always work to be together, to do that, but be together under the stewardship of Christ.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a tough one.
Yes, sir.
Especially during the holiday season. Great topic.
It was good.
Be careful.
It was good. Again, like I said, it's all respectful, and it's all about, again, iron sharpening iron, and then understanding how to love our spouses in particular and build good, strong families in our society. Mm-hmm. So that's another episode of the Jonathan Project. If you again want me or Jason to come out and speak to you about these kind of topics, other things that are on your heart, please reach out to us at theJonathanProjectPodcast at gmail.com. If you want prayer, if you're going through something, you want us to pray for you, or if you have a topic you would love us to cover, please again reach out at theJonathanProjectPodcast at gmail.com. You can find this episode and every episode on Tuesday mornings at Apple, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, Spotify, you name it, we're probably there, and we look forward to reaching out and talking to you again next week. Jason?
Yeah, sounds good. All right, brother. Talk to you soon.
All right, everyone, take care.
All right, bye.